Welcome back, everyone. Today we're not going to be talking about a monster, creature, or apostle per se, but an item that is directly linked to them and is arguably the most important artifact in the entire manga of Berserk. But before we delve into it, you should know that by subscribing to this channel, you can actually have all the power and abilities of an apostle that you would want without having to sacrifice anything or anybody. That's right, it's all completely free. Just listen to the screaming face and click that subscribe button and join the band of the Ryan, and I promise you will not be sacrificed. So the word BEHELIT, or also pronounced BEHELIT or BEHELIT, however you want to say it, has a potentially crazy and very deeply layered reference when it comes to the real world. It could have possibly came from the name Baal-Berith, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of this right, but he was the supposed god of the Khanate city and later became viewed as a demon known as Baal-Berith, all one word, by Christian demonology. His name, Baal-Berith, very interesting, Baal being like, well, I mean, the Behelit kind of looks like a set of balls, and Berith, translating to Behelit, I don't know. But Baal-Berith translates to God of the Covenant. Baal is a Semitic title and honorable in a way of meaning something like master or lord that could be a reference to any god or even human officials. And Berith was known in the words of alchemy as the element of which all metals could be transmuted into gold. The demon Berith also appears as a soldier dressed in red, riding a red horse and wearing a golden crown on his head. According to other descriptions, his skin is red too. This is also definitely something to point out, as the most important Behelits in Berserk are red or a crimson color, and also if Berith wore a golden crown, the crimson Behelits are also called the Egg of the King. Kings usually wear crowns. I'm sure there's something to do with that. Now, Behelits in Berserk play an extremely pivotal role in the story and in the entire idea and concept of causality. Causality, if you want to think about it simplistically, is fate, but it's kind of more like the idea of cause and effect. Something happens which influences a bunch of other things, which all branch out and then influence even more things, and as it goes on and gets larger and larger, it gets greater and greater in importance. And that once small thing has now, with a butterfly effect, created events that have drastically altered the course of all mankind and the universe itself. A Behelit is like a piece of that puzzle, giving things a little push, if you will, onto the flow of causality, being that little nudge in the right direction, or wrong direction if we're being honest, in the story of Berserk anyway. Behelits are first seen in chapter 0C at the end of the very first volume. They are small items about the size of an egg with a similar shape. It's been remarked to be like a stone as well, so I imagine it's hard, with maybe a little bit of squish to it. Like a really strong stress ball. There's an image of a face, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth on them, but distinctly misshapen and not aligned properly. A Behelit comes from somewhere deep in the astral world. Again, just a recap, Berserk has 3 worlds that all overlap each other. There is the physical, which is what we all know in the world of the living, everything that's physical. The astral world, which has many, many layers, some containing dead spirits, some monsters, and some, in the very deep layers of the astral world, the God Hand themselves. And finally, there's the world of idea, which is like a connected consciousness of all living things. So, depending on how you want to take it, it's generally assumed that Behelits were created by something called the idea of evil. This is from the chapter that has since been omitted by Miura himself, and thus rendered non-canon. But in it, there is a godlike entity brought into existence by mankind's desire for reason. A reason for our suffering, a reason for all of our questions about life. Is there life after death? What is the point of it all? And so on and so forth. And so the idea of evil has taken it upon itself to influence the flow of causality, to bend it to give people the answers that they seek. But as you can tell by the name, the idea of fucking evil, its intentions are not predominantly for the good. But then, just wanting answers never meant that there would be positive answers, now did it? There's something to think about. Anyway, to help influence causality, to create its own butterfly effect, Behelits were somehow sent through the astral world's layers into the physical world. Now that a Behelit is here, It is fated or destined to be used by a specific person, a specific human being. Ones that would fall into the parameters for its activation and thus be perfect to disrupt the current flow. A BEHELIT is specifically designed by powers out of the normal conventions of man to be in the hands of the one it is destined for at the moment that person needs it most. So a BEHELIT cannot be activated by anyone else or until its intended time. The most you can get out of a BEHELIT until its fated time is it may open an eye to look at you or make some kind of uncomfortable face on occasion. And by fated to be with you, I do mean no matter what. So if you threw it away, it would, through a matter of circumstance, somehow make its way back to you at some point. You can't really get rid of it. The requirements to activate a BEHELIT are quite simple. Desire and despair. When you've reached your lowest low, your absolute breaking point, when you are in such desperate pleading need for some higher power to come save you from your horrible current life situation. Now, it's also a fair argument to say that the user's blood also plays a part in the activation. As seen with several apostles in flashbacks, they did bleed onto the BEHELIT, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that's a necessity. But of course it does add a dramatic visual flair. Once you have despair from your life and then desire to escape it, and those things are strong enough, then the face on the BEHELIT will align properly. It will bleed from its eyes and let out a horrifying scream. From there, you are transported from the physical world into the astral world. But it's not like taking you from a point A to a point B in the physical world. In other words, it's not like transporting you from one end of the street to the other. You remain in the same location, but you phase into another world. The astral world and the physical world, they occupy the same space, but it's a completely different, I guess, dimension if you want to call it that. Once activated, usually something will obstruct the space that you were in the physical world, like a storm or something that would be impossible to walk into as a normal human on the outside world. And you will be taken to almost the deepest layer of the astral world that there is. And here, you will have an audience granted with the God Hand. I did an entire video about the God Hand, so check that out. Link will be in the description, in case you want to know more information on these cuddly creatures. Also, the whole activation and being granted a meeting with beings of incredible power could also be a reference from the 80s horror film Hellraiser. The God Hand themselves were design-wise seemingly inspired from the Cenobites of Hellraiser. Also, Hellraiser has 4 Cenobites, and there's 4 God Hand. And in the Hellraiser movie, you have to solve a puzzle box, and then that opens the gates of hell for you. So a small device that accomplishes a similar goal as a BEHELIT. But once here, the BEHELIT has basically fulfilled its intended purpose. It's a link between the physical and astral meant to bring the chosen person here at the predestined time. Once here, the person will be given a choice: to sacrifice something they love in order to achieve greater power and become an apostle, or not, and they could live the rest of their life in that despair. I've also made a video on apostles, so link to that will be in the description as well if you want to check that out. But clearly you are made to make the choice at your lowest point, thus pretty much guaranteeing that you will sacrifice someone. The sacrifice is given a brand upon their skin and is then pulled into the abyss. The abyss is a swirling vortex of souls that is full of pain, suffering, the eternal, and I kind of like to think about it as the Berserk version of hell. After this, the BEHELIT returns to its docile state, and that is that. Now, there was an instance in the very first arc of the manga where an apostle known as the Count was defeated by Guts, and on the verge of death, the Count, in despair about being about ready to die, was able to activate the BEHELIT a second time. But the second time is no different than the first. Someone you love must be sacrificed. Oh, I should also mention that there is also no confirmation that your sacrifice has to be a person, but it's what we've seen thus far. Anyway, should the person or apostle refuse, as the Count did in his second case, not wanting to sacrifice his daughter, then the one pulled and forced to live in the abyss is the apostle themselves. As I mentioned earlier, there is a special BEHELIT that is a crimson color. Hard to tell in a manga form that's black and white what color any of the BEHELITs are, but the one Griffith had was definitely meant to be a red-like color. So the crimson BEHELIT is known as the Egg of the King, and it performs the same function as any other BEHELIT with a couple of pretty big exceptions. For instance, the Crimson Bailet is only activated once every 216 years, and has also done so during an eclipse. None of that would need to be worried about for the user, as it works as the same as the regular Bailet for activation, and will activate at the appropriate time. During the eclipse, the chosen person is brought to the God Hand and offered the same idea of a sacrifice, except instead of becoming an apostle, they would become a God Hand as well. This being the case, the sacrifice would naturally need to be much larger, like an entire band of mercenaries, for example. There's meant to be 5 God Hand members in total, so the Crimson Bailet has theoretically only been used 4 or 5 times. Some speculate the first God Hand didn't actually have a Bailet, but we don't really know. Also, theoretically, after the 5th God Hand member is created, the Crimson Bailet would never be used again. Bailets have also been channeled to be used for an alternative purpose by the character known as the Skull Knight. Hey look, I did a video on him too, link is also in the description! Skull Knight is still a very unknown entity, but a declared enemy of the God Hand. He has been collecting various Bailets and ingesting them. Later, he was actually shown to have used those ingested Bailets, somehow, to fuse them to a sword in order to harness their power. This is the Sword of Actuation, the Sword of Resonance, depending on your translation, or also just known as the Bailet Sword. With the power of the Bailets, or the power to transport one from the physical into the astral, Skull Knight is effectively able to cut a tear in the very fabric of reality, creating a portal into the astral world in the form of a sword slash. He has used this to directly open a portal to the Abyss and have it suck in several enemies, and most of the location that he was in at the time. His intention being wanting to tear a portal to the Abyss and suck the God Hand inside. A few questions remain about the sword though. How long does the effect last? Must he collect more Bailets after using the sword once? Or once forged, will it always work? It's hard to say, but definitely a fun instance of a character using a weapon of fate against itself, and I do really like that concept. No monster manual is complete without a how do you fight this thing portion, but if you found a Bailet, what can you do? There's been no evidence for or against the idea that a Bailet could be destroyed. I would tend to believe that it could not be, like not be crushed, not be slashed, or else the sheer existence of a Bailet would be at risk in the physical world. But what would it be like in the modern age? Like, can you nuke a Bailet? Probably, if you got one. In most cases, there's really nothing to worry about. Odds are the Bailet is not meant for you, and thus you would be able to do nothing with it. It can't be forced to activate. But if it is for you, even if you try to get rid of it, even if you throw it in the ocean, and then 30 years later, after your wife leaves you for Chad Thundercock, and takes the kids and divorces you for all your money, and leaves you on the street, stranded and lonely, suddenly, you see that Bailet again in a street gutter staring you in the face. And it's going to be pretty damn tempting to use at that point. Would you use it? You tell me in the comments below. Why or why not? But anyways, guys, thank you for joining me for this video. Thanks for joining another installment of the Monster Manual. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video and comment down below, because any interaction with the video does help me out, helps the channel out very much. Also, a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Link for that is also in the description below, along with those other videos and the Discord. Check all of that out. Subscribe if you want to stick around. I'll talk to you guys in the next video.